Well, Richie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Arlena, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I reached out to you when you first published your book, right after Rich Roll. Was that right around the time you published the book?
Yeah, I taped that just before it came out. Yeah.
Oh, you did. Okay, number one, I love Rich Roll. And then I was like, who is this tall drink of water? Irish, your Irish accent. I was like, Lord have mercy. And then I got the book, and I love that you read it yourself because it's your story, but also the accent's super charming. All the ladies,
Thanks.
all
Uh,
the ladies love the Irish accent.
well, if you guys can understand me, okay. Yeah, no, I was glad they wanted me to do it because I didn't. All the characters in my story, I know what they sound like, so it would be kind of impossible for somebody else to do the voices and stuff like that, you know.
Absolutely. And you did this project with Dave Krinsky and John. I'm not sure if I'm going to say his last name right. Alschuler.
Close, John Altschuler.
Alschuler. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. John is the cool name. In German, it literally means old school. So his name John Old School.
You know what's
Yeah.
funny is my maiden name is Messersmith, which means knife maker.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's
That's
cool too.
cool.
Old school. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. No, John and Dave are my partners. I've been working with them on it for a couple of years, and they want to make it into a TV show. They did. They're the creators of Silicon Valley, and they were showrunners on King of the Hill. Yeah.
Just took a drink of water and
Oh, you're
inhaled it by
okay. You all
accident.
right?
Yes, I'm a
Yeah.
professional.
Yeah.
No, Silicon Valley. Oh my gosh. I think that was one of those shows that I literally laughed out loud. Like
Oh,
most TV shows you kind of giggle at. It was hilarious. I love that show.
yeah, the guys are two of the best comedy writers in Hollywood. Like my story isn't really a comedy, even though it's funny. But the reason I met the pair of boys was I was helping a friend of mine who had a comedy project, and he wanted me to help get some big producers attached. So I was pitching my friend's project. So I just reached out to John, and that's how I met them. And that project it wasn't a fit, but John was cool, and he said, I like you guys, keep sending me stuff. And then I was working on my book, and I sent my original draft to John, and he really liked it. And then we became partners, and we rewrote the book and got our
Wow.
book deal, and now we're working on developing it as well. So
Oh, you're going to turn into a show?
yeah, it's going to be a TV show. Yeah.
Oh my God. I caught you right at the right time.
It could take a while, but yeah, that's the plan. Yeah. Mm.
No, that's amazing. No, yeah, no, they've done a lot of really cool things, and I was excited to see that they were part of your book. Now, when you say that you sent him your book, was it like the first draft, or was it like one of the iterations of a draft where you're like, okay, like you probably had to rewrite it a few times and then you sent it to him?
No, I sent him the original draft. Like I
Oh, that's
originally,
brave.
I just wrote like, well, I had rewrote it, and some other people had read it, but it was really long. I basically wrote a chronology of all my experiences from 15 to 30,
Mm.
and it was like 430 pages, 100,000 or 105,000 words. But it was,
Wow.
yeah, but it was really long. Like, and they liked it, but it had to be rewritten because to make it more accessible for, I guess, non-addicts. So we rewrote it together based on my experiences getting sober with the 12 steps. So each chapter is based on one of the 12 steps and crazy stuff that happened to me.
Yeah, man, some crazy stuff happened to you too. I felt like we were hanging out that whole week that that I was listening to your book, because it felt very much like stories that I've heard from, being in meetings and things like that. So that was super cool. So we'll definitely talk. We'll get into it. Typically, where I like to start out is asking people. I call it the lightning round, but I don't know why I call it that. It's very slow. Um, but I'm just curious, like when you first got sober, were there any books that really helped you early on?
Any books that helped me? Uh, the one of the 12-step meetings I go to, the big book was what helped me get sober, because that's how I learned about the 12 steps, and my sponsor took me through the book, and that's basically how I got recovery. So yeah, that the big book was definitely a big impact on me, but no biographies or anything like that, nothing like what I've written.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, the book is called The Gangster's Guide to Sobriety, My Life in the 12 Steps. I probably should have led with that.
You can put it in the notes.
Yeah, that's so good. Yes, I agree. You know, it's funny though, when I first got sober, it was written in like the late 1930s.
Hmm.
So it has like this old timey language. Did you find any of that to be a barrier or challenging in any way?
Yeah, I didn't find it challenging. There was some of the writing in it sounded funny, like
Yeah.
the guys talking about going to whoopee parties, whatever the hell they are, you know. But even though it
Is it a
was, I
swinger
guess,
party?
I don't think it's swinger parties. I don't know if they had that shit in the 30s, but yeah, some of the language was funny. But I was the history major, so I was kind of interested in it. But it was so weird to me that some of the stories, before I read that book, um, I didn't realize that other people were like me. The stuff that
Mm.
happened to me in my life, like there's one story in it where it's talking about, it's kind of comical, but imagine if somebody's addicted to jaywalking and
Right.
they get a thrill out of jaywalking, and they just love jumping in front of cars, really quickly, and but that's how they get their thrills. But then it gets worse and worse, and they're getting knocked down and ending up in hospitals, and they still keep on doing it because they just can't stop the thrill. And that kind of stuff, when I was reading it, I was like, fuck, that's just like me, like with the drinking and getting high, because I had all kinds of crazy consequences, like ending up in hospitals or in the police station, but I kept doing it and I couldn't stop. So,
Right.
yeah, it was weird. It was like, even though this thing was written nearly 100 years ago, it's like it was telling my story in a way too.
Isn't that amazing? It kind of speaks to the idea that, maybe our situations are different, circumstances are different, but the feelings are all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Like most people I've met at meetings haven't been criminals like I was, but we still had the same kind of feelings and obsessions with getting drunk or high, and it's weird because I've met people of all ages and races and backgrounds, and we all have the same problem, but we just end up in these rooms together where we find a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so the podcast is called One Day at a Time. Does that have a special meaning for you, or do you ever use that saying?
Yeah, yeah. When I got sober, the guy who helped me save my life, my sponsor, his name was Bernard, or Americans might say Bernard. So,
Bernard. Yeah.
yeah, when I was new, I used to always freak out about, Jesus, how am I going to stay sober if my parents die, or if I go to, if I go to weddings or something like that, what am I supposed to do? Like, or, I used to trip out about what would happen in the future. Like, how would I not drink at certain occasions? And it used to freak me out. And my sponsor said to me, he says, we do this one day at a time. Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about next year. We do it one day at a time. We just say stay sober for today, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. And for me, that was a relief, because before I came to the meetings, the longest I could say stay sober on my own was like 3 months. That was my record. And like just pure willpower, I could, if I got in some trouble, or maybe if the wife was pissed off at me, or if I lost a job or something, my record was 3 months. So anything beyond that, or even the 3 months, seemed like impossible to me. So when it was broken down to me, we just do it one day at a time. You don't want to drink today, we won't drink today, and let's see what happens tomorrow. That made it more simple and more manageable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Do you have a self-care practice, and it can be like a day, like a morning practice, a weekly schedule, or I even had people talk about like going to annual retreats. What does your self-care practice look like?
Well, I do a lot of different stuff. Like before I got sober, I was total atheist. I didn't believe in
Oh,
God,
were
God at
you? Oh,
all.
that's right.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, completely. Like, because loads of bad shit had happened to me. Um, I was beaten and tortured when I was younger by gangsters in Ireland, and you know, I seen lots of bad things happen to people. So I didn't really believe in God before I came to the meetings. And but I, through my experiences of what happened to me, I came to believe in some kind of a higher power, my understanding. I when I first came, uh, I was like definite. I didn't want to believe in God. Like the first meeting I came to, at the end, like I was listening to what people said. Like they were talking about their feelings, about the quick to anger and irritability and all this kind of shit that I was feeling all the time. And when I heard this, I was like, wow, this is the solution to my problem. But then at the end of the meeting, everybody stood up and held hands and said the Our Father, like the Lord's Prayer. I just said, what the fuck is this shit? Like, because I thought it was a church or some kind of a cult or some sort of a Christian thing. Like, so it really freaked me out. I wasn't going to come back to the meetings after that. But I left the meeting and Bernard says to me, he says, well, what did you think? I said, what the fuck is all that God shit? And he says, what God shit? I was like holding hands and saying the fucking prayer, and then there was these steps on the wall, and it was God, 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 God. I saw this God stuff, and it really freaked me out. I wasn't going to come back. And Bernard says to me, "Never mind that shit. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to believe in anything." He says, "There's all kinds of people in these rooms. There's fucking Buddhists and Muslims and atheists and every fucking thing. You don't have to believe nothing. Just shut your mouth and come back to the meetings." So when I heard that, then I was like, okay, I'll come back. I definitely don't want to believe in God. So I had no God at the beginning. And then there was a buddy of mine, Pat McGuire. He was like an Irish American fella. He was a hardy fella, and I really respected Pat because he had a similar background to me. And I came to a meeting one day when I was new enough in sobriety, and Pat says to me, "Did you find a higher power?" And I said, "Yep, the group is my higher power." One of the fellas told me that the group could be my higher power because you need a higher power to get rid of the addiction. Because when you come to the meetings, you're powerless. You have no power over the amount of drinking or getting high that you're doing. So I told Pat that the group was my higher power, and he says the group is a stupid higher power, and
He
and
said it was stupid.
yeah, I was like, how so?
What the
Like,
fuck?
and Pat says, well, if the group die in a plane crash or if they all drink again, you're fucked. You've no higher power. So I was like, geez, he's right. And so I says, well, it was San Francisco, so there was all kinds of hippies around. So I says, well, my higher power would be a tree. And because I heard some hippie saying that. And Pat told me if your higher power is a tree, he's going to get his chainsaw, cut it down, and burn it with gasoline. And then you're going to have no more higher power. So I was like, fuck, okay.
He's
Well,
running through all
yeah,
your
yeah.
your
So then I told him it would be a doorknob because I heard some smart ass saying that their higher power was a doorknob. And then he told me if my higher power was a doorknob, he'd shoot it with a shotgun, and I'd have no higher power. So he was like killing all my higher powers, and I says, Patrick, what am I supposed to do? You're wrecking all my higher powers. And he's told me, he says the best higher power is like something you can't see, and then nobody
Mm.
can fuck with it, and you don't even need to know what it is. He said just make it up, because I didn't want it to be Jesus or the Jesus God, because I was raised Catholic, so I didn't want to believe in Jesus again or any of this kind of shit. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do with this higher power? He says, when you have the cravings, because when I was new, I was craving booze
Mm.
and cocaine all the time because every time I had a feeling, anytime something bothered me, or I was annoyed or scared or bored, or even if I felt good, I wanted to celebrate with these things. So I was having these cravings to get high and drink all the time when I was new. So he says, when you get these cravings, just pray to your higher power for help, and they'll go away. And he says it works even better if you get on your knees. I didn't really believe him, but I gave it a try. And every time I would have these cravings, I would pray. I didn't even know what the fuck I was praying to, but they went away. So I found this higher power. I still don't even know what it is, but I hit my knees every morning and I pray to my higher power. And I haven't felt like drinking or getting high now in about 11 years. So so one of my daily practices, to answer your question, is when I get up, I make my bed, and then I hit my knees and I pray to my higher power, and just ask my higher power to keep me sober. So that's one of the things I do on the daily. And I have a lot of sponsees that I work with, right? People that I help to or try to help them to stay sober. So one of the things I'll do with my sponsees is I'll send them a gratitude list every day, 12
Mm,
things I'm grateful for. And
12,
they'll,
that's a big
yeah,
list.
yeah, and they'll send me 12. But it can't be the same shit every day, because if you just say the same shit every day, you're not really trying. So I try and come up with new stuff every day that I'm grateful for. It could be something simple, like grateful for this coffee, grateful to be chatting to you, grateful for Bob Seger, whatever it is. Like, but I come up with 12 new things every day, and I send my gratitude list to my sponsees, and they'll send it back to me again. Um, and the reason I do that, I was told when I was doing sobriety, that you should write out a gratitude list, and then that will make you, that'll fix the negativity in your head. Because sometimes I wake up and my head might feel like a garbage dump, or like
Mhm.
it just wants to pick out all the things that are wrong, or things that piss me off or whatever. So when you do this thing of writing a gratitude list, it kind of fixes your head into positivity. So that's one of the things I do every day. And I try and go to meetings as often as I can. And I have my sponsees I work with. Um, we uh, we work the 12 steps together, and I meditate as well. Sometimes I don't meditate every day, but it's not fancy. Like, I just sit in a chair, set 10 minutes on the phone, and close my eyes and just try and shut the thoughts out of my head. Like, and that's like a reset button for my head. I do that. And I go to a convention every year for other sober people up in Yosemite as well. We go up and we have meetings, and we eat out together, and
Is that the
it's
one in
pretty.
November?
No, this one's in March.
Oh,
Yeah,
March. I was
yeah.
like,
There's
wow,
a
that'd be funny if we were at the same convention. I didn't even know it.
yeah, yeah. So those are the kind of things that I do, and just try not to be an asshole in general.
There it is. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
We can boil the whole program into relax, don't be a dick.
Hmm.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so let's talk a little bit, let's back up and talk a little bit about, how we got here. You
Hmm.
mentioned you had experienced some traumatic experiences in your childhood, but and I obviously read the book, so I'm going, or listened to it, but I'm going to ask you things as if I hadn't, so the listeners can get to know you a little better. But do you know why you started drinking? Like, ultimately, was there like underlying trauma or trying to be a
Well,
part of? Why did it start?
well, I don't believe that there was anything special about my upbringing that made me an alcoholic, except that I'm from Ireland. Like, the Irish do like to drink. That
Genetically
was
predisposed.
well, that was true for sure when I was a kid, but it might be different now. There might be less of bad drinkers than they were back then. But when I was growing up, it was normal for everybody to go drinking. It was like, it was what you did for every occasion, really. So drinking was a normal thing. But I think some people are just born alcoholics. Like, I think I was addicted to things before I even had my first drink, whether that was TV or video games or even candy. I like to I just like to get out of my head a little bit. I was kind of a nervous kid. Didn't have a lot of self-confidence, and uh yeah, I wasn't a very strong person. Like, so when I discovered drinking, I was about 14 or 15, and it just did something for me that I didn't have automatically. As soon as I had my first drink, I didn't care what anybody thought about me. I had I wasn't shy or nervous anymore. It was like it like changed my personality. And from being sober for a while and talking to other people, I know now that booze and later cocaine and drugs, they do something for me that they don't do for regular people. Like, a normal person can have one or two drinks, and maybe it feels a little bit good, but it's not the greatest thing ever. But for me, when I tried that, it was the best thing ever. It was so good that I wanted to do it all the time, and I didn't give a fuck what the consequences were. I think that's the difference between an alcoholic and a normal person. And so it did something different for me. And on top of that, then I didn't have control over it. Like a normal person can go in and have one or two drinks, couple of scoops, and they can go home, and that's the end of it. But for me, sometimes I could do that, but a lot of times there was no predicting what would happen. I could get into a fight, or I could go for two drinks and have 9 or 10, or I could be gone for the whole weekend, you know. so
Your
so
poor
I think
parents.
yeah, I definitely put them through a lot. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's the reason. I think some people are just born with an addictive personality.
Yeah, no, I totally relate to all that. I had my first drink probably between 8 and 10. And I remember like, this is it. Like, this is absolutely how I want to live the rest of my life. You're right. That's not
Yeah,
normal. Not normal.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you grew up in Ireland. Can we talk a little bit? Your book was so good with this, some of the stories, but I was especially, I want you to tell the story about how you got arrested for the IDs.
Oh yeah. Okay. So,
So good. You were
thanks. Yeah.
young
No.
too.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, the drinking age in Ireland is 18, and I got into it when I was 14 or 15, and so finding the drink was good, and I was doing it pretty often. But you have to be 18 to drink in a bar or a nightclub, and I wanted to drink with the grown-ups, and I wanted to score with the women, and hang out with the adults. And you can't really get into bars if you look young and are young without an ID. And I used to sneak into nightclubs sometimes. There was one in Cavan called the Farnham. And I would like climb in through the bathroom window and sneak in that way because I looked really young. I had a baby face, and but then the bouncers would catch me, so I needed a fake ID. One of my friends, uh, he owned a fast food restaurant in Cavan, where I'm from, and somebody left an ID behind, and he showed it to me, and then I had the brainwave. Oh, I could copy this and make a fake ID. So I got on my computer and Windows Paint. It wasn't very complicated back then. Those IDs in Ireland weren't hard to copy. It was like a blue card with typewriter writing on it, and a police stamp on the back. So I figured out how to make it. I made one for myself, and then got it well, I had to laminate it myself too, but it looked pretty good. And I had this working ID for myself. And then all the other kids found out that I had one, and they were all asking me to make them as a favor for them. And then I had another buddy who had an idea that we start up a business. I would make them, he would sell them, and we would be partners. So it just happened like that, and I ended up making a lot of them for not just kids I knew, kids in other schools. And yeah, it just mushroomed into a big illegal business. And I got all my drinking money from
So you were an
making these
entrepreneur.
ideas. Yeah, it just kind of happened
Very
just like that.
popular.
Well, I was popular because I could make the IDs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then eventually I got caught. I guess one of the kids' parents found the ID and asked where it came from, and the kid spilled the beans on us, and the cops showed up at my friend's house, and he ratted me out, and I got in a lot of trouble. I was lucky. They let me off with a warning because I pretended I didn't make that many of them. So I got away with it, you know.
Did you have to give up all the names of the people that you made IDs for?
For that, I think they believed me.
Oh, isn't that something? So I just
Mm.
thought it was funny that they had you come in and teach them how you did it.
Yeah, because they didn't know. So in Ireland, the police are called the Garda. So the IDs had a Garda stamp on the back of them. So they didn't know whether I stole this stamp from the police station or whether I had a cop that was working for me to do them. So it was really the way I made the stamp was I designed it on Microsoft Paint, and if you print onto like a glossy photo, like an old photo, it stays wet from an inkjet printer. Then
Mhm.
you use the wet stamp, and you stamp it onto your card, but you have to make it backwards because when you stamp it, it comes out backwards. But I was there explaining to the cops, and they were just dumbfounded that I had figured out how to do this. Like, but I was so determined to get into the clubs and drink in the bars. I,
Ah,
I was just determined to figure it out.
yeah, the motivation was very strong.
Yeah, yeah.
I relate.
Single-minded.
Single-minded, yeah. It's no, it's amazing that you figured it all out. And I think it was just hilarious that they just couldn't get over the fact that you were like, what were you, like 16 at the time?
Well, I would have been 15 or 16. Yeah,
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 you were
just a
young.
kid.
You figured, yeah,
Hmm.
outsmarted the government at
Uh,
16.
well, yeah, no, they were talking about charging me with offenses against the state, which is what they charge terrorists with, because that's terrorists do this, like make fake IDs and stuff like that so they can travel, you know.
Yeah, you're so
But
lucky.
yeah,
I wonder how, if it would have been different nowadays after post 9/11. People take security very seriously. Lucky you. Okay, so things progress and you had lots of escapades. You got married in the meantime and was having a family. And I recall some stories about like disappearing for a while.
yeah,
Tell me about some of the consequences that made you feel like, yeah, I need to quit.
lots of them. Well, I got caught dealing drugs when I was about 19 back in Ireland, you know. It was kind of similar to the IDs. I started taking ecstasy. Once I tried ecstasy, that was my new favorite thing, and
Mm.
I was doing a lot of them. Like, and I was broke, so if you sell the drugs, you have the money to pay for the drugs. So I ended up selling them firstly to my friends just, and then it ended up getting bigger and bigger, and I was sending them to people all over Ireland. And one of my employees was caught by the cops where I'm from, and then he set me up with the police, and I got caught with a bunch of ecstasy and amphetamines, and I was really lucky I didn't go to jail. I got 3 years probation, and
Wow.
that was a big warning because it. You know, when you're a kid and you can do stuff and get away with it, because they usually won't send you to jail when you're a kid, but when you're a grown up, is a different story. So that was my first one, and then later on I got into so I ended up hanging out with these other criminals, and you know, doing crazy stuff like kidnapping, and you know, that was scary stuff. And at one point these guys came to my house because they were trying to find out information out of me about one of my friends. And you know, they beat me and tortured me and bit my nose. And you know, that was another big warning sign that I was on the wrong road. And I was like 19 or 20 at that time. So
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, it was a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
All these.
Was there a moment where you were just like, I can't do this anymore? Because a lot of times we talk about a moment of clarity or where you finally are like, okay, I'm ready to get help.
Well, I had a lot of them done through the years, but what, like, suicide attempts, even like my first suicide attempt, I was about 19. And make a long story short, I was going out with this girl, and we broke up, and I took it really bad, and I was doing a lot of drugs at the time, and decided I was going to kill myself. I had 100 ecstasy, and I ended up taking 30 of them. And the other 70 I was going to take, my roommate hid them from me because I would have took the whole 100. Um, I was really messed up that time. I don't know how I lived. I didn't go to the hospital or anything, but I was really messed up. I was putting cigarettes out on my arms, and
Oh,
yeah, it was really crazy. That was the first one. You would think that would be enough to make me want to stop, but what would happen is I would have these bad things would happen to me, and then I would feel terrible and say, oh, I'm never doing this again, I need to change my shit. And then I would start to feel better either a few weeks later or a couple of months later, and then my mind would change. It would be like, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe I'm just being dramatic, you know. And I
just
had a
being
few of
dramatic.
yeah, I had a few of those incidents down through the years, and my mind would always change and go back. But the very last time was when I was 28. another suicide attempt. Um, but this time, the idea came to me. I knew I was depressed, but I thought like maybe I was crazy. I thought like I knew I had the drink and the drug problem, but I thought I had some kind of mental illness. I thought maybe I'm bipolar or maybe I'm manic depressant or something like that, or but the idea came to me that maybe if I go to meetings and try to get sober, because I tried staying sober on my own, but I couldn't do it. Like my record was 3 months. That was my absolute record. But I would always end up going back again. And I knew these Irish fellas in San Francisco that I worked with that were sober guys who went to meetings. So I knew that they had a problem and they go to these meetings and then they were able to stop and their lives, they could fix their lives. So the idea came to me, oh, maybe if I go to these meetings that maybe I'll stop wanting to kill myself. I didn't see the connection between all the drinking and drugs I was doing and
Isn't that
and
funny?
the wanting to kill myself. I thought they
Yeah.
were completely unrelated. But yeah, I really did because I
I know,
didn't
we're
know
so funny.
no, but I didn't know shit about what it means to be an addict. I just thought an addict was someone who does too much drugs or does too much drinking. I didn't realize that part of the package is that shit makes you depressed and you know all these other symptoms like. So the idea came to me, maybe if I go to these meetings, I'll stop wanting to kill myself. And then this fellow Bernard I mentioned, we were working together in construction. Like I was a criminal, but I was also a carpenter at the time. And yeah, and
Like
I used
Jesus.
I don't know if it was much like Jesus, but we had the same occupation. But yeah, so I used me and Bernard we worked together on this holiday home up in Tahoe that we were building. And I used to always ask him questions about the meetings. I said, "What goes on in these meetings? How the fuck do you fucking stay sober?" But he didn't give it away. He just he kept it quiet. And he says, "If you ever want to get sober, give me a call." And he gave me his number. And then after this last suicide attempt, I decided to give him a ring. And I called him, and he brought me to my first meeting, and I've been going ever since. And then when I got sober and started going to the meetings and working these 12 steps that he told me to do, I stopped wanting to kill myself. And I haven't thought about killing myself in 12 years now, you
It's
know.
amazing.
So yeah, and would you believe the whole depression was because I was doing too much drugs?
Shocking.
Yeah,
Yes. Maybe not shocking.
it
Yeah.
was for me. It was a revelation.
It was for me. I know it's funny the realizations that we have once we get sober. Like when I showed up to meetings, I was completely self-centered, but incapable of self-examination. It's like all these weird paradoxes that we like, seemingly obvious things.
Hmm.
That's what I love about the program. It has a way of clarifying things.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the Matrix. For me, going to the meetings and learning about what it means to me, it was like the Matrix. It was that like that movie where you take the red pill and you're like,
Mhm.
shit, this is how things are really working.
Yeah, yeah. It's a rocket into the fourth dimension type of stuff. So okay, so you've been sober for a while, and what did you and Bernard, I can't say Bernard. Did you
Hmm.
guys start working steps right away?
Yeah, well, originally I had a different guy. So Burner brought me to my first meeting,
Ah,
and so like when you go to the 12-step meetings and you're new, a bunch of people always approach you and offer to be your sponsor. And I knew that you had to tell your sponsor what's really been going on. So Bernard wanted to be my sponsor at the beginning, but I was afraid to get an Irish guy because I knew you had to tell your sponsor all your shit. So I
yes,
didn't
that's
want I
true.
didn't want I didn't want to tell Bernard in case he'd tell the other Irish guys, or I was kind of cagey. So I picked another fella first who was an American boy, and he was my first sponsor, and he was cool, but he ended up being high.
Ah,
So I got
that
rid of him, and then
happens.
yeah. But
Yeah.
he still saved my life at the beginning, even
Yeah.
though he was high. It was a weird situation, but yeah. So then I ended up going back to Bernard, and I says, "So how does this work? How the fuck do I stay sober?" He says, "Well, we do the 12 steps, and you get commitments, and you don't take a drink no matter what." So I did all the suggestions that he put in front of me, no matter how stupid they seemed. I was like, fuck it, I'll try it. I've tried everything else, including killing myself. so
Yeah.
so I'll give it a go. And it worked.
Yeah. Little service commitment, little showing up to
Yeah.
meetings, being,
Yeah. I
it's
didn't
amazing how service can alter your self identity.
yeah, at the time I didn't understand how it worked. At the time, I just they told me suggestions. I was okay, I'll do it. But then later, after you get sober and your head clears out, you understand how it works. So like these service commitments are basically jobs at the meeting. So there's people who like, I guess, make the coffee. There's people who pass the basket to pay the rent. This kind of shit. So when a person is trying to recover from addiction, they're completely self-centered, and it's not that they're bad people; they just can't help it. So it's so when you make yourself do these selfless acts, which is to help out the meeting, you know, it's contrary action to how you usually behave, and it
Mm.
takes you out of the self-centeredness. The same with the gratitude list, like. Addicts can feel like a victim. I used to feel like a victim all the time. Before I was like, oh, I'm really a nice guy. Just bad shit keeps happening to me, like, the reality is, like, to get out of selfishness, you have to do these kind of things you might not want to do. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned contrary action. That is a huge, it's very subtle, but so important. It's like, don't do the things that you want to do and do the things that you don't want to do.
yeah,
Yeah. All these,
yeah,
all
because
these cool little things we learn.
I was running my life my way and it wasn't working out, so I had to listen to
Yeah.
somebody else, and I'm glad I did, because obviously I'm not a perfect person. There's no such thing as a perfect person, but I'm a lot better than I was from doing
Yeah.
this contrary act.
You were saying, oh, I'm just a nice guy, bad things. I think the irony there is that when we strip away all of the dysfunctional behavior, you're left with your true essence. And I believe that most people are actually pretty good. Most people are good. We just develop these like survival skills or these dysfunctional behaviors to survive, right? And at some point they no longer serve us. But I do believe that in essence that we are good people and that we're just trying to get back to our true selves.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm definitely no saint, and but yeah, it is cool to learn how to have a solution for how messed up my life was, because I couldn't figure it out on my own.
Yeah, getting help is so important. So we kind of covered steps 1 and 2. Let's say, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, not necessarily everything, right? I felt like we actually have a lot of power, but we're powerless over alcohol. Did you do any exercises around? Did Bernard have you do exercises like write down the definitions of powerlessness, unmanageability, and look for examples in your life, or how did
I
he
think
get you through step 1?
well, step one, yeah, he basically told me make a list of examples of how drinking and getting high has got you bad results. And I had a list of those, between, like I mentioned, arrests, getting hurt, ruined relationships, shame to my family, losing good jobs. We didn't dwell on that too long, because it was obvious to him that I was at the bottom, and there was no more denying it. Like if you're trying to end your life is unmanageable.
It's
so
pretty,
so it was
pretty
pretty
clear.
obvious. It was obvious to me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then you did discuss sort of how you came to believe in a power greater yourself. Did you do a formal step 3, turning your will and your life over to the care of a higher power?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I figured out that I needed to find some kind of a higher power in order to get over this powerless condition. So yeah, yeah. We said the prayer together that was in the book.
Yeah. So step 4 is one of those steps that, they say it separates the men from the boys. I mean, that was the first practical self-examination process I had ever done. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, at the start, he really explained, the way Bernard explained it to me is, you need to write down a list of all the people, places, and things you're angry at, and
Yeah.
and then how it affects you, and what was your part in it. And for me, as soon as I got that, I called it the shit list, because I had a lot of people, places, and things I was angry at, and like I said, I felt like a victim. So I was like, oh, this person did this to me, this person did this to me, and I wrote down all my list. And then, we did step 4 and 5 together. So step 4 is make the list, and step 5 is share it with your sponsor and talk about it. So we would go week to week. I would write some shit, and then we would meet up and talk about it. And at the start, I couldn't see what my part was in things. I kind of had so much delusion that I felt like I was the victim in every situation, pretty much. And in some situations I was, but like, for example, that fella who ratted on me and got me in trouble with the cops, like, um I think I called him Ollie in the book. That's not his real name. I had to change all the names in the book. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, the lawyers made me change the names. So the top of my list was Ollie, and me and Bernard were talking. She said, well, what did he do to you? I says, he set me up with the cops. And then he says, well, what was your part in it? I said, I didn't have a part in it. I was a stand-up guy. Like, fucking, when I got arrested, the cops asked me to rat on the person above me, and I wouldn't do it. I'm not a rat, like. And I didn't think I had a part in it. And Bernard says to me, he says, well, weren't you selling drugs? I says, yeah. I says, yeah. He says, well, aren't drugs illegal? I says, yeah. He says, well, if you weren't fucking selling drugs, you wouldn't have got caught, and he wouldn't have told on you. And that had completely escaped my mind. I really thought that, you know, I had no part in it, and then realized from talking to him, because it's kind of hard to see your own shit. That's why you need a sponsor to get sober. It had completely escaped me that I was doing something illegal, and that was my
Isn't that
part in it.
funny?
Yeah,
Yeah, they say
yeah,
it's hard to read the label from inside the jar.
true. Like, yeah, so yeah, I had all these kind of revelations with all these things that I was angry about, and then I wasn't
Yeah.
so angry about them. You know.
Yeah. Once you saw your part, did that relieve you of the resentment?
Yeah, yeah, it did eventually. Yeah. When you feel like a victim, it's easy to be resentful against somebody, but when you're less of a victim, you have less of resentment, you know.
Yeah, that is very profound. Did you start noticing patterns of behavior when you were doing your 4-step?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I had a temper, I was disloyal with women. Um, yeah, yeah. Just kind of obvious.
Yeah. No. And so I feel like the men in the program are sometimes a little harder on each other than the women are. I tend to lead with compassion, because once you start seeing all this stuff, it's really, you start thinking, oh my God, maybe I'm a horrible person. Right. So was he able to highlight some of your assets as well, or did he offer compassion, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, he didn't judge me. Like, and most people who come to 12-step recovery haven't done the things I've done. Some people might just get a DUI or have a divorce and decide they want to get sober. Like, so I always felt really guilty. Like, maybe, like, I was usually the worst person in the room at these meetings, for the things that I have done. So I was very surprised that people accepted me. They didn't care what I had done. All they cared about was, oh, there's a new man here, and he wants to get sober. Let's help him. They didn't judge me. So yeah, there was a lot of acceptance, and it took me a long time to get over the shame of the things I had done. Because I would come to meetings at the start, and I would hear other people sharing, whether it was a soccer mom who got a DUI, or someone who got drunk and fell on the Christmas tree or something like that. And I would always think that I was different, like, oh, I'm way worse than these fuckers. And then eventually I heard a fella tell a story, and he was a Hell's Angel. And it was the first story I heard that was similar to mine. Like, and then I learned to look for the similarities and not the differences.
Mm. No, that's really important. Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you, 7 and 8, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings and then made a list of all persons we had harmed. Can you take which leads to step 9. Can you talk a little bit about some of your experience about making amends?
Yeah. So, like I said, I was a criminal for a long time, so I had done a lot of bad things, and most of them I had got away with. And step 8 is just make a list of all the people you had harmed and what you did, and then step 9 is make amends wherever possible. So Bernard says, just make the list. Don't do any of them until we talk about it first, because bad things could happen.
Hmm.
So I said, okay. And the one I felt worst about was I did a kidnapping. Well, I helped with a kidnapping when I was about 19 back in Ireland. There was a guy who had borrowed drugs from a friend of mine and didn't want to pay them back. And then he was in trouble. My friend was getting threatened because he had got them on credit from somebody else. So, and I owed money to my friend as well. So I was in trouble with my friend. And so basically my friend, Tomo, he said, we need to kidnap this guy, Travis, to get the money that he owes. And you need to help with it. And I felt like I had to do it because they could have done it to me. So I helped with this kidnapping, and we kidnapped the guy, and then um his family was made pay the money that was owed. They didn't harm him, but I'm sure it was a terrible experience for him. So I felt really bad about this, and that was the top of my list. And so in my head, I'm trying to figure out how I would make an amends for each of these things. So I was thinking, what's the opposite of a kidnapping? Maybe I could send them on a lovely vacation. That's what I was thinking I was going to do for an amends. So I brought the list to Bernard. He says, "What have you first?" I says, "Kidnap Travis." And he asked me. He says, "Does that man know you had anything to do with the kidnapping?" I says, "No." He says, "Well, don't fucking say it to him. It's probably the worst experience of the man's life. Just leave him alone and don't fucking kidnap anyone again." And I was like, "You don't think I should send him on a vacation?" He says, "No, just leave him alone." I was like, "Okay." So there was ones like that where I thought something was going to happen, and then what he told me to do was the complete opposite. Some of them were like just phone calls to make apologies for things I had done. It was a really tricky one. One time I robbed this valuable painting. It was worth a lot of money.
The
And
painting.
yeah, and I, as soon as I robbed it, I sent it back to Ireland for safekeeping in case the cops came looking for it. And it was worth a lot of money, and it was kind of like my retirement plan. So I had got away with this painting, but I knew it didn't belong to me. And to do the amends, I would have to give it back. So I got it sent back from Ireland, but I couldn't just show up at the place where I robbed it and say, sorry, I stole this. Please don't arrest me, So I had to figure out a way of giving this painting back. And so I asked Bernard, and he didn't know how to do it. And he asked his sponsor, and he didn't know. And we had to ask around to try and figure out how to return this painting. And there's a fella I know from the meetings, he's an old IRA terrorist, and he came up with this plan where we would like bring the painting to an undisclosed location and then go to a payphone and call the place and say, this is going to be here. We were going to do it that way, but then we figured that was too risky because someone else could have found the painting. So we ended up not doing that. And then near where I robbed it, there's a seminary for training priests. So we came up with the idea where I would just go down and meet a priest and tell them what I had done and that I needed to give this back, and I did that, and the priest gave it back anonymously. So that was the most difficult one, but I felt like $1,000,000 getting rid of it because it didn't belong to me, and I just felt really good to get it off my shoulders.
Isn't that amazing? Like when we just clean up our side of the street, the freedom that comes.
Yeah, but there was no easy ones. Like even just
Yeah. No.
making phone call. Like sometimes I'd ring somebody up because I felt bad about my behavior. And Jesus, I'd smoke like 5 cigarettes before I'd make the call, and then I'd make the call, and then sometimes the people wouldn't even know what I was talking about. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, this girl I lived with in Australia. When I was over there, I felt really bad about embarrassing her one time, And I rang her up, and she couldn't even remember the incident. But I felt so bad about it, and then after the call was over, I'd smoke another 5 cigarettes. There's no easy ones, like you know.
It's amazing when you care about what somebody thinks, or if you're carrying
Mm,
shame for so long, just getting
yeah,
them on the phone, man, that the hands shaking, the heart's pounding. It's like you just did a bunch of drugs. It's like the fear of confronting that, but the freedom is like the equal
mm,
opposite. It's almost like the greater the fear in the beginning, the better the high the other side when you finally take care of it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, they call, 10, 11, and 12 the maintenance steps. So, and you did talk about a little bit of, taking inventory and meditation and a higher power. What does life look like for you these days?
Well, even though I don't feel like drinking or getting high no more, I still go to meetings all the time, and I still work with others because that's what you're supposed to do. Once you get a bit of sobriety, you're supposed to help the next guy,
Mhm.
because if there was nobody there when I came, I wouldn't have got sober. So I still try and work with others, and after I've been sober for a few years, I've explored some other 12-step programs, that have helped me in other areas of my life, and yeah, I just work in progress.
Yeah, yeah, we are just a work in progress. I think it's so funny that line that we say, we are not saints. And I'm always like, is anybody confused about that? Like it's
Mhm.
it's pretty self-evident. No, but it's a
Yeah.
it's a beautiful way of life. And um I'm excited about some of the projects that you have going on. You're currently on Mayor of Kingstown with Jeremy Renner, and that's an amazing cast. I was wondering, like, when you're in those environments, is there a lot of drinking going on, or is everyone just very professional? Are there times when you're feeling like swept up in the moment, kind of wishing like you were like a normal person?
It's not what you would expect. Like, when a lot of people think that everybody's drinking or high on sets. Maybe they were in the 90s
Maybe,
and the 80s,
yeah,
but yeah,
parties,
but
maybe.
uh I've seen people who have problems. Um I worked with a guy recently who like smokes pot all day, every day, even while working. But it definitely doesn't make me wish I was still doing it.
You're
Yeah,
like,
no,
no, thank you.
yeah, the majority of people are professional, and you don't really see that, but um, it is good to have the experience of knowing what it was like, because I definitely don't get tempted when I see that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was thinking like you would get invited to parties or because I think socializing sober for a lot of people is hard at first, like what you were saying, like, how am I going to get through a wedding sober? How am I going to get through the death of my parents sober? So yeah, those
Well,
can
yeah,
be really
I don't
challenging.
I don't hang out at nightclubs or anything like that. Or if I go to a bar, I'll have a reason. I'll have a reason to be there. Like, I don't hang around in them kind of circles. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't want me around either. Because one of the things you'll notice after you're sober is people who have a problem, they usually get uncomfortable around somebody who's sober.
For
So
sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like if you're out and about and there's somebody who has a problem and they see you're not drinking, they'll say, "How come you're not drinking?" That's one of the telltale signs, because a normal person doesn't ask that question, like,
Yeah, nobody
because it,
cares.
it yeah, it makes them feel bad, like, because they're
Yeah.
self-conscious. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. The people will be like, oh, what are you drinking? Just like as in, I used to be in sales in Silicon Valley, and people would be like, oh, what are you drinking? But I would always have a drink in my hand already, so nobody would offer me anything, right? And I drink like cranberry soda, which is often mistaken for a vodka cranberry soda. So nobody cares.
Yeah, that's one of the tricks. You have a drink in your hand already. I like caffeine, so I'll drink a Coke in them kind of situations, and Another trick if you're trying to stay sober in them kind of situations, always have an escape plan. So if you're going to some kind of a party or an event where you think it might start to get uncomfortable later, have your car or your escape ready to go, because yeah, sometimes you can go to parties or something, and then when everybody's getting drunk later, it gets boring for you if you're sober. So
Yeah.
hang around like when it gets
Drunk
to
people
that
are
point.
hella boring.
Sometimes, yeah.
They're like repeaters, say the same thing over and over again. Well, listen, I want to be respectful of your time. This was so helpful. I love hearing your stories. I think everyone should get the book. The book is so good. And I really hope that this does turn into a series. I think it would be amazing to hear.
Thank you so much, Charlene.
Yeah. So if people want to reach out to you or say hi, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. Richie Actor is my handle. And you guys can find Arlene on there too.
That's right. Yeah. And I'll leave a link to your book and your Instagram account. So, well, it was great spending time with you today. I love all your stories and I wish you all the success.
You too. Thank you so much, Arlene.
Thank you. Where is oh, there it is.